Welcome to another episode of the Dental Insiders with your hosts, Matthew Petchel and Michael Dunn. The Dental Insiders is a podcast for dentists, dental team members, and industry professionals. We'll share stories and lessons from clinicians and industry visionaries with the goal of providing an entertaining and informative look at the industry we share. And today, our guest is none other than Dr. Tony Stefanou. Welcome, Tony.
Hey, guys. Great to be here.
Great to have you.
Thanks for joining us. Let's just jump right into it. Michael and I were talking earlier about this, and I think originally we had set it for maybe one podcast, and after, you're looking at your bio and everything you do, I'm pretty sure we could do 10 podcasts with you, but we're gonna probably cut this in half and do two. So first question, you're either more than one person or you don't sleep at night, because by our count, you have two different companies. It's like one of those things where people ask, "Who's your favorite kid?" Or This is a big political answer. So, which is your favorite of all the companies? Which is the favorite that you run? And maybe you can just give a recap of the four, and maybe there's five. I don't know.
Yeah, great question. I don't know if they're all actual companies, if you would say, from a legal entity point of views, but yes, I do have several companies, and some of them have some divisions. Being a New Yorker, I am naturally a night owl, so I don't sleep a lot, although I do try to catch up quite a bit on the weekends. But I don't really have a favorite. I mean, I would say that I really work with them all equally in some respects. My two main companies are the Dental Sales Academy and Connect the Dents. And, I'm sure we'll get into some of what I do with those as we go on with the podcast. But, they do have a couple of divisions to them. The Dental Sales Academy does also have a recruiting side to it. It's mainly focused on sales training and strategy and business development for dental companies. I do have a division where I do some recruiting with the Stellar Dental Careers, and I also have a division called Dental Innovations Direct, which really works with companies that are not really selling through dealers. And so I work with an independent sales team to help them get more exposure and get more sales out in the industry. The Connect the Dents is more on really on the merger and acquisition side, whether it be through manufacturers or organizations and dealers, and also through the DSO and practice side of it. So do I have a favorite? I would say that, Dental Sales Academy and Connect the Dents are all kind of intertwined with each other, but I spend about equal amounts of time with all of them. So don't really have that favorite child, but they're all fun, and they all keep me very busy.
Great. Makes me tired. Just
exhausted. We're done.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for joining Dental Insiders. Now, so you outside of not sleeping much, how do you organize your schedule and separate your time or organize your time between all of those entities such that you give enough love to each one of them?
Well, it's a good question. I probably break a lot of the rules that we read from some of the so-called experts in the industry to talk about time management. But I have a rule of thumb that just basically says that if I'm working on a project, whether I'm in the middle of it or just sending out proposals or just working on the initial discussions, I pretty much make a rule, unless I'm away on vacation, that I answer people within 24 hours. And my whole thing revolves around email, as it does for many people. So like you guys as well, I go through hundreds of emails a day. And what I normally do is first thing in the morning, I'm checking email. I answer those that have to be answered immediately, and I save those that have to be saved. And of course, I delete a bunch of them. But I think really what I try to do, and again, breaking the rules of thumb, I do, before I go to bed at night, I always check email one last time, because there are some things that I feel that I can handle before the day hits the next day. I usually have a fairly full schedule, but I also leave at least 1 hour, probably 60 to 90 minutes a day, where I keep for flexible time, because there are always things, as you guys know, that may come up. That you might have to throw a conference call in, or I may have an inquiry about something that I realize is time sensitive. So I leave that 60 to 90 minutes outside of a basic lunch break. I do email first thing in the morning, late at night. And again, the idea is to get back to people. I'm kind of interested in observing how other people do things. And one of the things that I always hear from people is that, they save messages, and they don't want to check messages at night. And then what ends up happening is a lot of times they realize that things no matter how good you are at management, there are things that kind of slip through, and all of a sudden a week later you realize, oh, I had to get back to that person, and you miss an opportunity. So, I really believe that you have to stay on top of it. The other thing I do is when I get in my office in the morning, right on my desktop here, I open up all my social media platform. I'm always on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all day basically, and I'll minimize them and then pull them back up. I do a lot of business through LinkedIn and a lot through even Facebook Messenger, and so I always kind of keep things open. I can always see when something is coming in that I need to take a look at, and if I get off a call and I have a few minutes, I jump back on and see what it is through maybe Twitter or Facebook that I may have missed. And so I kind of organize my day around just staying on top of what's happening out there and making sure that I get back as quickly as I can to people and don't let things sit. So that's the best way I can answer it.
That's a good answer. Do you use any special tools? Do you use any software tools, or do you manage your life like most of us, kind of through your email and your calendar?
Yeah, I pretty much do. I know that there are certainly applications and programs out there that can help with it, but I guess I'm kind of old fashioned with that. I mean, I'm online all day when I'm not traveling, but I try to keep things very organized with the calendar, and and I write a lot of things down. I always have little Post-it notes all over the place next to my phone. It sounds I'm aging myself by doing that, but I think that's still the best way to keep reminded of things. I see something jumping out at me in my own handwriting, and sometimes that's the best way to do things. But I pretty much I stay on top of it by keeping it that way.
Cool. Yeah.
It's funny. You read over the last few years, emails consumes all of us, really. You think about it.
Yeah.
Think about how simple life would be if email didn't exist. Like how much you'd have half of your day to actually work instead of manage email.
You would spend half of your day writing letters.
Carving wood,
carving various glyphs on your cave wall.
There are times when you still have to. It's still nice to write a letter or a note and send a card out to someone, and we appreciate that now. We laugh about it. I was doing a sales training the other day, and we were laughing about pre-internet. I mean, I did a lot of my stuff while I was still practicing when I got involved on the business side of the industry. We did a lot by, just leaving, you had to leave voicemails that were effective. You had to fax. I mean, you talk about the days of the thermal paper and fax, and, sitting there faxing 5 pages out to someone, some outline or proposal or some promotional piece. And, there's always something something that replaces some other technology. But I don't know. People talk about email going away. To me, it's still the most effective way of doing things. And there's a place for everything, including writing letters. And there are times when I do merger and acquisition stuff where it actually really is powerful to be able to write a letter to a CEO of a company, and they actually get that on their desk. And sometimes that's their way of picking up the phone and connecting with you, where they might not do it on LinkedIn or may not do it on email. So we have to use a little bit of everything.
Right. So you kind of segued into our next question, I think, and switching gears a little bit here. You mentioned, when you were practicing, you've been on both sides of the fence, which I think is, I think it might be a bit rare for our industry, and obviously we've had some guests that have been on one side or the other, and a couple have been on both sides, but you've been on both sides of the fence, so to speak. So tell us a little bit about your practice, when you were practicing dentistry, and how you made the transition, and why you decided to make the transition to the quote unquote industry side.
Yeah, so I'll keep this short. It's hard to believe I've been in 30 years now, and I practiced for about 20 years. So sold my practice about 9-10 years ago. So I'm 100% now on the business side of the industry. But for quite a while there, I was doing both. So there were times when I was practicing full-time, and also I was VP of sales for a couple of different companies. And that, talk about not sleeping, that's pretty much, I think now it's actually easy compared to back then. But I think people describe me as a little bit of a rebel. I guess I've always been that way. I even practiced a little bit differently. I got out in the late 80s and did a couple of associateships to get some clinical experience, and then really was having a beer with one of my old fraternity brothers who happened to be a chiropractor, and he was talking about the fact that he had to move his office, and I was looking at that point to kind of get my own thing going. And rather than buying a practice, which I really didn't find anything that suited me, I decided we kind of brainstormed that we would be use the word entrepreneurial, but, we decided to kind of go in together, and he had an established chiropractic practice. I had been out a few years. And so I said, well, the only way I'm going to build from scratch is to kind of split expenses with someone. Let me do it through a cross medical discipline. And we opened up a dental chiropractic center, which now people would refer to something like that as a wellness center. We did it to split costs. So we actually had assistants and an office manager that did both dentistry and chiropractic. And I really learned a lot about marketing and about getting new patients. And, chiropractors do things a little differently with that. It also introduced me to some areas that were somewhat taboo in dentistry, which was retailing products, which we had never, in dental school, they taught you that was kind of not the thing to do. But I saw how patients responded to certain things that the chiropractors did for treatment. I saw what they did as far as the convenience factor and having professional grade products available to them. And that kind of got me into some other things. I started to work with an oral hygiene product line that was one of the first alcohol-free programs out there. And I started to teach and lecture about it. And then I got into product development with them. I did some sales with them, got into product development, then launched those products. Then got involved with marketing and sales from a different area. And then they asked me to kind of take over their dental division back in the 90s. And everything kind of snowballed from there. I wasn't planning on getting into this to the level I'm at right now. And I was a dentist that, even though I was doing things a little differently as the dental chiropractic center, I plan on practicing full-time for, 40 years like most dentists do. But, as time went on and I started to get into understanding a little bit more about what goes on the product side of things, and I worked with this company. I had some other companies contact me to give them some help with some things. And then a few years into that, I started to realize that the one thing that's missing is that a lot of companies have great products, but they're not really sure how to get them sold. And so I developed the Dental Sales Academy and started doing workshops on how to sell a dentist. And I opened them up to all companies. And from there, everything kind of snowballed and got to the point where I realized that there was a big missing out there. And being someone that had launched products into the industry and someone that, of course, had at that point a lot of clinical experience, I thought to myself that, I could really help the industry by helping manufacturers in particular better understand how dentists think. And from Dental Sales Academy, everything else kind of happened. 2006, I got to a point where my office manager was saying to me, well, when are you going to be here? Because I was on the road quite a bit. And I realized my wife's a dentist as well. And my wife had a separate practice. And I was also having a separate business office. And I got to the point where we needed to streamline. And I said, I think it's time for me to sell the practice. And then I went full time and connected dents. Everything else happened from there. So that's my condensed version. But it was done mostly an accident, not by purpose.
Well, so I don't know if you picked up on that, but Tony decided to partner with a chiropractor and not his wife.
Yeah, I picked up on that. Yeah,
got that. Yeah. Okay, so which is the question that
we made a pact when we got out of dental school that even though we went to the same dental school, had a similar philosophy, we also realized that dentistry is a demanding profession, mentally and physically. And I know it works for some people. They have spouses as an office manager, or they practice with a spouse. We just felt it would be healthier for us overall. To not do that, and it worked out great for us.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm guessing when I say that most spouses in a practice, they don't work together because it's what they've always wanted to do. They do it out of necessity, right? And then it's like, well, we can either live with it or we can't. Yeah. And I can tell you personally, it would not work for me. It would not work in my life with my wife. She would be in my business, and we've already talked enough about that.
And moving on.
And moving on. So you write and teach and speak a lot. What is the industry doing well when it comes to marketing? So let's talk about the Dental Sales Academy. It's been around 6-7 years. Is that right? About 7? And
well, more formally, yes. I mean, I've been doing workshops for many years, but the actual the services with Dental Sales Academy and the frequency of the programs and all of that stuff has been, really 7 to 10 years now. And then I would say, on a larger scale.
Okay. And so give us a quick snapshot of a company. And it can be, you can tell us a real company that uses the service, or just make one up and say, oh, it's a laser company and they needed help with a new product and I helped develop the strategy. Tell us kind of what how it works.
Well, rather than getting into an individual company on this, I think there are some examples I can give later on, maybe on some other questions. But, I have found really when it comes down to it that regardless of whether you're selling disposable items or a burr or, a panoramic machine or laser, it could be a dollar item, or it could be $100,000 system. Most companies have the same challenges. What they're really good at is developing innovative products, and they love their products, which they should. And they do a good job of first having some sort of strategy, whether they go direct or through dealers, as to putting together a sales team. And where the breakdown occurs, there are actually two things that happen. One is that they generally teach their people, do a good job on teaching them on their products, about the company itself, and then also teach about the competition. There isn't a category I can think of. It doesn't matter what you're doing today where there isn't a lot of competition out there. So they do a good job of that. The missing piece has always been them really, and you got to remember, a lot of people that run companies too are not necessarily dental people by nature. So while they might have dental people on their board, they might bring dental people to speak. What they miss from the sales and marketing aspect is really understand how dentists think. And so I always talk about what the missing piece is psychologically, understanding what's important to the dentist, and the sales and marketing has to follow. The breakdown, unfortunately, very often occurs. There's two things that happen. One is that the sales department and the marketing department are very rarely in sync with each other. And I see that all the time with dental companies. And I try to really work together. You have to have a marketing message that fits into what dentists, what's appealing to them. And then you have to have the sales team that are kind of talking the same thing. So sales and marketing, you guys know, are intertwined. And yet when you work with companies, they can be sitting a few feet from each other, but they don't speak to each other very often. Right. And that's just what happens. And so I try to bring them together with that. And, so I think the other thing, too, is that the challenge very often is the fact that many companies are, from a marketing perspective, they're always talking about themselves, how great the product is, that they're the best in their category. And that doesn't always work well out there. So, what my mission is really to get them to understand better. There are certain things, there's only a handful of things that are important to dentists. Your message has to fit in that, whether you're marketing or you're in a sales conversation, you're asking questions. And that's really what I try to do at the Dental Sales Academy is to understand the psychology of why dentists buy and how you can tweak your message so that it is, they're much more responsive to that, whether you're advertising, whether you're at a trade show, whether you're doing an email subject line, doesn't matter what it is. That's really the biggest challenge most companies face.
I notice that a lot of companies have their director of sales and their director of marketing is the same guy or girl.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Which, you talk about them being in sync is really important. But I find when it's the same person, they're less in sync than when it's two people because they truly are focused on – most directors of sales are – you're either one or the other. Right. You can have some skills on the other side, but you are usually one or the other. And the one that wins out is the one that you're from. And then the other one is this – kind of thing that gets picked up on. What do you see that too? And is there any way to overcome that?
Yeah, I do actually. So, we could talk about this all day, but here's the truth. If it's the same person, and that's usually for budgetary reasons, that's the way it is. The person usually very often has more of a sales background, and then the marketing side, especially social media promotion, they don't really know much about. And you have to be good at that as well today. It's not just, what you call traditional old-fashioned marketing. So there's usually that's not always done well. When they're different people, very often you have a younger person who's taking over the marketing side, and that's good in that they're probably better on some of the social media and stuff, but they're also very creative people, as you know. Pure marketing people are very creative. That always doesn't work in dentistry. Sometimes you make things a little too cutesy or you make them too complex, and you make them to the point where the dentist just doesn't have time to figure it out, and you lose people with that. And so the other part is, if you're a director of marketing, I urge companies that have separate marketing and salespeople, not only for them to have huddles together and really work on developing the same message, but the marketing person has to be out there. Very often the director of marketing is sitting in an office at their headquarters, or even if they're working remote, they don't go to the trade shows. They don't go to a lot of the meetings. They're not actually out. They don't go into offices. I mean, to me, it would make sense to have the marketing people actually see what goes on in dental practices, to understand the dynamics of the practice. It's still all about the target and the end user, which is the dental practice. And a lot of times, if it's a separate marketing person, a younger person, they're creative, they're smart, but they don't really understand the industry as they're not out there.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, that's actually going to wrap up our first part of our podcast because I feel like we're just getting going here.
We're just getting going.
And Michael has to go to the bathroom, so that's going to end part one right there.
Well, we are really
we're digressing.
We're digressing and somehow telepathic.
That's right. Wow. So please join us. That ends part one with Tony Stefanou. Please join us for part two.